Hello, welcome to my talk today. My name is Joseph Mbele. I've introduced myself many times. Um, Maybe I should do that again, just a little bit. Joseph Mbele, I'm from Tanzania. I'm a Tanzanian. I'm here at St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. I teach in the English department. I've been here since 1991. And before this, I taught at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania from 1976. I was there in the literature department. And here, I'm in the English department. I enjoy coming out on social media, sharing ideas informally. This is not my classroom. I like being out in the community, talking with people, and it's just a lot of fun, I should say. Let me switch off my cell phone. Okay, here we go. Let me switch off my cell phone. Yeah, here we go. Okay, that's done. So that was my name, and that's what I do. I teach. I'm here at St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. I've been on Facebook Live several times now, and I'm getting more and more comfortable doing this. And today I would like to talk about an interesting topic. And you can see this topic right there on my head. Make Africa Great Again. I designed this hat several years ago. Obviously, I was inspired by President Donald Trump, who has a hat just like this, and his followers have hats like this. And they say, make America great again. So I can't pretend that this has nothing to do with President Donald Trump. Yeah, if we can do make America great again, I thought I could do my own hat with the message, make Africa great again. Certainly President Trump believed, and he still believes, that he has a vision for his country, and he knows how to make it great. I'm not involving myself in the politics of this country. There are many people who agree with Donald Trump, and I know there are many people who don't, but I'm just saying he believes in what he says. I believe in what I say, make Africa great again. I'm an African, so I really want to present a message about making Africa great again. I put up this message on Facebook several years ago when I first got the hat. And I remember several Tanzanians were asking, when was Africa great? I was quite disappointed by this. And it seemed to me these are people who have not read the history of Africa. And so they were talking, rather dismissively about my idea of making Africa great again. And so they asked, when was Africa great? I really think these were people who need to read, the history. They need to study the history. So anyway, I might say a word or two about this as I proceed with my presentation here. Yeah, I can see some people are already there listening to me. Philemon Mutoi, welcome. Yeah, I'm back in the show. So, why do I say make Africa great again? I do believe that Africa was great for the greater part of its history. Yes, for the greater part of, for millennia, Africa was great. And I believe, as many people do, that we lost that greatness at some point as a result of foreign intervention. And I'll be talking about that. And so our destiny was not to be what we became under colonialism. No, not at all. We can reclaim, the greatness and then, just, be great again. And so, in brief, that's what I'm trying to say here. So, my fundamental premise or my fundamental idea is this: greatness is something that you carry within you. Greatness is something you establish for yourself, inside yourself. You decide whether to be great or not. And greatness is an attitude of mind. That's the way I would define it. So it's something that's within yourself. And it is something that has to do with self-knowledge, that you know who you are, absolutely. It has something to do with self-confidence, absolutely. It has something to do with self-esteem. Once you have those things within yourself, you are great. You have a sense of being great. You have the confidence, you move through life knowing who you are. You believe in yourself. That is greatness. That is greatness. And it's the same for a community. It's the same for a country. It's the same for a continent. Yes, a community that knows itself, believes in itself, has confidence in itself, is proud of itself. That's a great community. A country that knows itself, that has self-esteem, that has confidence, that it can do this, it can do that, it can take matters in its own hands, it can shape its destiny. That is greatness. And so if you embrace those ideas, those ideals, those sentiments fully, you embrace those ideals, those sentiments fully, and therefore you are great. What follows is, other people might recognize that. You provide the opportunity and the reason for other people to recognize your greatness. But if you lack the self-confidence, if you are unsure of yourself, if you lack self-knowledge, then you make yourself vulnerable. Other people won't feel obliged to respect you, to recognize you as great. So that's my fundamental premise. That's my starting point. It has to do with yourself. That's the foundation. And then other people come in. They recognize your greatness. But even if they don't, that has nothing to do with you. It's none of your problems. It's not your problem. It's their problem. That's one thing I will say. It has nothing to do with other people. It's really fundamentally something you make for yourself. So let's go back to Africa. As I've said, for millennia, Africa was great. I'm a folklorist. I study, I record, I interpret African stories, African traditions. And what I see in these traditions, for example, folk tales, our traditional folk tales, you hear the voice of Africans, which are very secure in the knowledge that they are in charge of their lives. They know who they are. They articulate their worldviews, their values, without any apologies to anybody. They're so aware of themselves as human beings who are rooted in their circumstances. And so they tell these stories, they articulate their value systems, their ideas, they philosophize, they do all kinds of things without waiting for anybody to tell them how to interpret their reality, without waiting for anybody to tell them what's right and wrong. They have it in their own traditions. So again, when I look at the stories, the songs, the proverbs of Africans before the coming of Europeans, I hear the voice of people who have that greatness within themselves. And as we know from history, Africans created all kinds of things. They created systems, economic systems, trading with other Africans. They built cities, they built infrastructure, they did all kinds of things. They were creative in the arts, music, storytelling, sculpture, dance. They did all this themselves on their own terms. That is Africa before it was messed up by foreigners. And then, indeed, there was a time when Europeans came, not just Europeans, but other people as well. It was aggression into the African continent that disrupted this system that I'm talking about. And so with colonialism, the colonizers set about destroying the Africans in many ways, psychologically, socially. They disrupted the social systems. They disrupted the minds. They colonized the minds, inculcated values. I don't even know if we should call them values. Ideas of dependence on the Europeans. They destroyed the self-confidence, and Africans began to feel that they needed to follow what Europeans did. They began to believe that Europeans' ways were the right ways, the proper ways. They began to look down on themselves. That is how Africans lost the greatness. That is how they lost the greatness. The minds were colonized, the socio-economic systems were disrupted, the political system was disrupted, we lost control over our destiny. That is colonialism. And that is the moment when Africa lost its greatness. So, the idea of make Africa great again is one that makes a lot of sense. There is an agenda we need to pursue. And I'm not the one who is introducing this idea at all. I look at the great writer from Nigeria, Chinua Achebe. Many people, most people perhaps, know Chinua Achebe. Great writer, definitely the most famous African novelist. He wrote Things Fall Apart, for example, A Man of the People, No Longer It Is, Tales of the Savannah, Beware Soul Brother, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Chinua Achebe, one of the greatest writers from Africa, in one of his essays, he was talking about the role of the writer as he saw it. And so he said, the African writer needs to teach the Africans, to teach us Africans, where the rain began to beat us. Where the rain began to beat us. So he recognizes that there was a point at which things went bad for us as Africans, where we lost our way. And it's exactly what I've said. He's talking about the colonial experience. Colonialism represented a big loss for the Africans. And so the role of the writer is to begin to rebuild the things that we lost. And it starts with things like self-awareness, self-confidence, and so on and so on. The determination to run our own affairs on our own terms, to be free. And another writer from Kenya, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, famous writer, a contemporary of Chinua Achebe. Ngugi is still alive. He has this notion of decolonizing the mind. Decolonizing the mind. He acknowledges that Africans had their minds disrupted, damaged through the colonial experience. We got into the schools, the colonial schools, and they didn't really educate us. They miseducated us. The cultural systems, the cultural institutions, they served the purposes of colonizing the minds. So we would be docile subjects of colonialism. And unfortunately, that continues to be the case. So again, the agenda of making Africa great again is right there in the words of these people. So in very brief terms, that's what I mean. So if I go back to the idea of the individual, I'm one of those individuals. I'm one of those Africans, and I have a role to play. As I've said, it starts with the individual. So what have I been doing? I've been thinking about this as I thought about making this presentation today, and I've been thinking about the work I'm doing. And so, briefly, I will share it with you. So, for example, many years ago, when I was an undergraduate student at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, from 1973, I got inspired to study our traditions. I was taking a class called Oral Literature. Yes, Oral Literature. We studied folk tales and legends and songs and myths and other verbal traditions. I got so inspired, I started recording folk tales from my culture, Matengo culture, and I published this book. Yes, Matengo Folk Tales. after 23 years of working, translating these tales, interpreting them, revising the translations, revising the interpretations, it was a very long process, very hard, but it was worth it. So now I look back on it, I realize what I was doing was actually to showcase, to bring out and showcase the traditions of our people, which show exactly how great they were. And so you read a book like this, you see the greatness of the Matengo people, and by extension, the greatness of our African ancestors. All over Africa, we have tales like this, and we need to study them to appreciate that greatness that I'm talking about. Absolutely. And so I've also said that it starts with you. And once you have done that homework, other people will see and they might acknowledge your greatness. The work I did with this book, just as an example, actually has yielded that kind of result. People around the world read this book, people around the world appreciate what I wrote. In fact, here in the USA, I have it taught in different places. I've seen it taught in different places, different colleges, universities. On the 17th of November, not 17th of November, 2017, the year 2017, on the 23rd of November, yes, 23rd of November, the year 2017, out of nowhere, this book was featured on a very famous American TV program. It's called Jeopardy. And all Americans that know me were very, very surprised. It came as a huge surprise everywhere that this book was mentioned on this very famous program, Jeopardy. It's a very rare occurrence, and it took everybody by surprise. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. You embrace your greatness, you project it, and then other people acknowledge it. Even if they don't, it's none of your problem. And so I've been thinking again about other things I've been doing. So I wrote this book, Africans and Americans Embracing Cultural Differences, published it in 2005. Again, now that I'm exploring this idea of making Africa great again, I realize the way I spoke in this book, talking about African culture, I realize there's just so much confidence and self-awareness and pride. I'm going through different topics, going through things that foreigners might see in our cultures and might look down on them, or they might consider them, not good or whatever. But I'm speaking with so much confidence, establishing the validity of my culture, my African culture. That is greatness that I'm talking about. Have you ever wondered, those of you who know my latest book, one of my latest books, Chickens in the Bus. Chickens in the Bus. Have you ever wondered why I wrote a book and gave it this title? And I've actually an article in here. This is a collection of articles, little articles, that I have an article titled Chickens in the Bus, in which I proudly talk about my culture, which is very much the culture of Africans around the continent. In my culture, we carry chickens, We value chickens as a very great gift for guests, for example. And it's very common. People will carry their chicken, they'll go into the bus, and they're carrying their chicken. It's part of our culture, and I'm talking about it. I'm acknowledging it as an integral part of my culture without apologies to anybody. And so in that article in the book, I'm speaking with confidence and validating my culture and validating this practice, this tradition of carrying chickens. And so if anybody from outside, had negative views about this practice, they read my book and they will see I'm making no apologies. But I'm not going to talk about the article now. Those of you who have read the book will know what I'm talking about. So I'm very happy that I'm actually implementing the thing I'm talking about, that greatness starts with you. You need to embrace your identity. You need to embrace your culture. And you need to showcase it, to manifest it wherever you go. Okay, I have another publication here, Africans in the World. Africans in the World. This one is not very well known, but I forget what year I produced it. It was actually meant for a cultural festival somewhere in Minneapolis many years ago. And so I created this. This is just a collection of posters. There were big posters that I pasted on the wall in the exhibition room at that festival. And then one woman, an American woman who saw the exhibition, saw my posters. She suggested I should put them in the form of a book. And so, yes, I have them reduced to book size. And so the first poster is this one here, in which I talk about Africa, the original home of humans. I very proudly talk about Africa as the cradle of the human race. And wherever I talk about Africa, and I have other posters here, I talk about ancient Egypt. Talk about ancient Egypt, the growth of civilizations, those kingdoms, ancient African kingdoms. I go on and on and on. I talk about colonialism, of course, the struggle against colonialism, the many achievements of Africans after independence, Africans on the continent and Africans in the diaspora. Again, to project what I said earlier, a sense of who we are and what we have accomplished. That is greatness. So back to the point, I'm wearing this cap, I'm wearing this hat for a reason, because it carries a message, and I definitely got the message from President Donald Trump, but I made it my own by proclaiming the need, the duty to make Africa great again. We transform our cultural systems, our political systems, our educational systems. We will make Africa great again. I think I'll write these ideas in the form of a very neat paper, and it might come out in one of the books I'm going to write in the future. But today I wanted just very briefly to make that point, because there are too many. There are some people out there who wonder why I made this hat and had this inscription, "Make Africa Great Again." I think I've said enough to provoke a controversy. We can have a debate, but that is my viewpoint. And that's it for today. Let me see. I can see people have been watching me, and there are some comments here. Thank you, Philemon Mtoi. I think because this thing will be archived, this thing will be on my oops, it will be on my Facebook page. We can continue the conversation there. I will stop the recording here, and I think I'll join you on the Facebook page. Have a nice day wherever you are. Have a nice evening. Have a good night wherever you are.